Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Harp and Guitar, People and Music. And thanks a lot for joining me here today for another episode of Whiskey's Blues Gumbo, the show where we take weird or unusual sounding blues words or phrases and we try to figure out what the heck they talking about. And today I wanted to talk about the term canned heat. Now, again, this one's a little bit more of an old-timey, if you will, type of blues term. You hear about it being sung in blues songs that were written and recorded sort of in around the time of Prohibition in the United States. And in some cases, slightly beyond that, because there were some states that chose to remain dry states, and there was even some counties within states that chose to remain dry or alcohol free, even after Prohibition was repealed. But canned heat is actually a term for that, literally that can, those little cans of gel, the flammable jelly that you would take the lid off and light a match or take a lighter and light it, and it would produce a fairly hot burning blue flame. And you could use this in like a little Sterno stove. Sterno was a brand of canned heat, but you could use it in a little Sterno stove to cook meals camping, or if you were a bluesman and you were hoboing around and you were hopping the trains and going from town to town, and you made a little camp on the outskirts of town somewhere and didn't want to have a big fire and have the bulls come and throw you in jail, you could make yourself something to eat or a hot cup of coffee or something like that with these little cans of canned heat. And now, basically, the reason why they were so effective and this jelly was flammable is because they contained alcohol. And you hear a lot of reference to canned heat in blues songs. And later on in the 1960s through to the early 80s, there was actually a band called Canned Heat. And it meant the same thing. And it was because back then during Prohibition, you could distill down and basically separate the alcohol from all the other ingredients in this canned heat, and you could drink it and get drunk. It was kind of a cheap way to get liquored up, if you will, back in the day. Again, especially during Prohibition, or if you were a Southern African American sharecropper or farmer or migrant worker or traveling bluesman and didn't have a lot of money in your pocket to spend on the good stuff. And most notably, there is a song called Canned Heat Blues by a bluesman named Tommy Johnson, who's no relation to Robert Johnson. He's actually comes a generation before Robert Johnson. He's from the mid to late 1920s and did some recordings as late as the sort of the mid 30s. But he influenced a lot of blues artists, bluesmen, singers, and guitar players, Robert Johnson being one of them. But Tommy Johnson had that hit song, Canned Heat Blues. And in that song, he talks about being addicted to drinking and getting drunk off of this distilled alcohol from these little cans of flammable jelly. The problem with drinking a lot of these is that it led to increased and more complicated and more chronic health problems than just drinking too much of what eventually became legal to buy over-the-counter alcohol. It caused blindness, and it also was known to cause other physical ailments such as sort of rot gut and also nerve damage, where you get the shakes and get the what they call the Jake legs. Jake is another term for distilled alcohol, where you get this sort of herky-jerky motion to your legs and or your limbs and your outer extremities. And eventually, unfortunately, a lot of cases, men who became addicted to canned heat or to Sterno or to Jake passed away, and they died quite terrible deaths, sometimes in sanitariums where they would dry out, but unfortunately their withdrawal symptoms were much worse when they were cut off from the alcohol, and they ended up dying from complications from that as well. So that's why you hear a lot of bluesmen, especially through the late 20s up into roughly the early 1940s, singing songs or talking about the subject matter of canned heat, or at least making mention of canned heat in some way or another, or Jake Head, Lightning Hopkins is another one who sings about Jakehead and Jakehead Woman and Jakehead Blues and that sort of thing. So there you go. That's going to do it here today for another episode of Whiskey's Blues Gumbo. On behalf of myself and my co-host here, Monk Music, I want to thank all of you once again for all of your support. Greatly appreciated as always. If you haven't already, please let us know what you think down in the comments. Send us a line if you come across anything weird in the blues that you want to know what it means. Certainly be glad to look into it. And of course, as always, if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Have yourselves a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.